All right, let's do this. So yeah, tonight we're talking about disaster. I promise that while the topic is a little bit, the topic can sound like it's going to be downbeat. It's actually going to be totally fine. I promise you that. And I'm going to walk you through how to build an anti-fragile marketing organization for B2B SaaS. Now, there's a couple of elements to this, right? So the first element is quite simple. It is why planning for the disaster is actually more relevant than ever. The second part that we're going to talk about is the opposite of fragility and anti-fragility. So obviously we call this session, we made an anti-fragile marketing organization as a concept. We're going to talk a bit about what that is. And then the third section, we'll talk about how you actually go about doing that. So let's dive in. So why is disaster planning more relevant than ever? Well, classic disaster planning basically sees a future that looks a little bit like this. And I'm actually pointing to a different screen here, so bear with me. It sees a future crisis on the horizon. That's a big kind of yellowish dot there. And it starts to make reductions in expenditure and tries to hunker down. It's effectively, if you're going to put a parallel on it, it's effectively the same thing as, duck and cover. Put something over your head and wait it out. But my argument here is that since 2008, we've had all of these things happen. And this is just a short list of the long list of disasters and things that could go wrong in the world. Financial crisis, global terror, financial crisis again, Brexit, food shortage, oil shortage, war in Europe, environmental crisis, resurgence of the far right around the world, racial violence, global pandemic. And put that last one there at the end. It's only a minor blip, right? But look, we're living in extremely volatile times. Disaster, unfortunately, is now the norm. So just let that sink in for a second. Good SaaS businesses are built on three things. The first one is a great product. That is that's the first one. So you've got to have a great product in order for people to even think about using it, right? The second thing is you've got to have a market that actually wants the product. If you build an amazing product, but no one wants it, and it happens all the time, you're never going to build a business. The third thing, though, is the ability to turn 1 and 2 into actual revenue, right? But here's the thing about that. It doesn't happen overnight. That's why we've got cash flow and time. It really does take time to build that thing. Marketing can really influence number 2 and number 3 in that list, which is a market that wants the product, and 3, the ability to turn 1 and 2 into revenue. So you can take a product and you can align it to a market's needs. And that's really what we're trying to do with marketing, right? But it does take time. So you need the runway. Now, judging by the guest list on this, there are a lot of people who will be like, oh, well, yeah, obviously to this slide. But in case this is not obvious, runway is basically net cash in the bank divided by monthly burn. Now, there's actually a more complicated version of that, and really monthly burn is actually a lot more complicated than just 2 words, but that's not too meaningful for this session, so I haven't included it. But your goal is to have enough runway as a SaaS business so that you can focus on raising your next round of investment, okay? So the line down here, now, begin, raise, doomsday, and close raise, that's the scenario that you want to avoid, because basically between now and doomsday, you need to get the raise in order to make this work, or you need to hit profitability, whatever happens first. But too many businesses end up raising too late, and they fall into that first category. Now, the second line there, the one at the bottom of the screen, is actually the ideal, right? So you begin your raise and you close the raise, and you actually never reach doomsday. Doomsday being we run out of cash in the bank, so we can no longer go about aligning product and market in order to actually grow the business. The challenge for SaaS teams is that under the traditional model of disaster planning, founders are encouraged to lengthen runway by any means necessary, right? That usually means cuts. Now, marketing in classic management theory is actually seen as a profit center. But in SaaS, for some reason, it is seen as a cost center. So it costs more than it makes. It's backwards when you're a marketer, but that's how it's seen by lots of people, by VCs, by founders, all sorts of people. And that means that marketing teams are effectively, and most commonly, the first cut actually made when things go south. But I want to look now at why that isn't always the smartest move. So when economic tough times hit, it's easy to just start slashing stuff, right? In the hope that you'll extend your runway. That's the goal. We want to extend our runway, but we also want to grow the business. It makes sense for investors to tell SaaS companies that they should extend their runways, because after all, if they can continue to operate, then there's a chance that they'll either find the alignment of product, market, and revenue, or that some bigger company will come and acquire the business. And you'll have heard a lot of conversation in the last little while about venture capitalists asking people to make big cuts. I mean, this is what, 19th of July. Only last week, a huge, very well-known funded, VC-funded company made a massive amount of cuts, and marketing was a big old part of that. This is the reality that we're living in. It makes sense for VCs to say that, and frankly, I'd probably be in the same mind if my incentives were the same as theirs. Fortunately, they're not, and so I can tell you that basically you are living in a scenario where you are trying to extend your runway over and over again, and it effectively looks like that bottom line. This top line gets condensed a bunch of times and spans out over a longer period of time, to the point where hopefully you hit acquisition or IPO or some other favorable exit for the VC, and hopefully for everyone involved. Unfortunately, arbitrary cuts make businesses slow their growth rate because they often cut the resources that are required to operate or manage growth. So remember that cost centers analogy? Well, marketing is in there, but marketing actually drives growth in most businesses in SaaS. It's the equivalent here of trying to fly a plane, right? So in order to take off, you need sufficient runway. That's clear. No one can argue with that. You need to get a lot of speed so that you can lift the plane off the ground. And, a longer runway potentially allows you more chance to do that. But here's the thing. If you only optimize for building more runway, you end up without any focus left to keep fueling the actual jet in the first place. And so the business doesn't actually move. So this is the actual example here of what happens when people optimize A, for runway, and B, for growth. In the first one, optimize for runway, they think about cutting cash expenditure. And so you end up in a place where you actually can't really afford to invest in marketing, or you have made a heap of cuts and you're on some sort of like weird natural growth versus organic growth or paid growth. And it doesn't really work. The other thing, though, is that you can optimize for growth. So in that, you spend potentially inefficiently at first, but you lengthen, you cut your runway, right? So you're hoping that you're going to hit a trajectory which allows you to raise money faster, going back to that slide back here, to get through these series faster so that you can go to acquisition or IPO or that end goal that we're talking about. But here's what happens when you only optimize for runway in SaaS. So let's say you're the green line. Your company is optimizing for runway. They do a big old raise at the start. They close a round of investment, and then they just basically conserve those funds as long as possible by not increasing their expenditure. Their expenditure tends to be marketing and growth. The other option is the person who optimized for growth. So remember that slide, optimized for growth, where the trajectory was much higher, but the runway was shorter. Well, all they did was they raised more. They raised more and they just spent inefficiently until they found an efficient way to spend on growth. That is a very fragile way to run a business. That first one, right? Just extending your runway infinitely so that you can stay alive. Fragile businesses tend to extend their runway in order to become the more robust in hard times, right? So we're seeing that right now. People are making massive organizational cuts. The goal for them is to actually stay alive long enough to get past this world of disaster. But I got to tell you, and as we've seen already earlier in the presentation, like disaster is the norm. So it doesn't make sense. But this idea of anti-fragility, let me explain this. So this, if you've never read it before or heard of him, comes from a book called Antifragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And here's the kind of the thesis of it. This is a quote. Anti-fragility is beyond resilience or robustness. The resilient resists shocks and stays the same, but the anti-fragile gets better. So anti-fragile marketing organizations actually benefit during times of disaster. But let me just kind of illustrate this for you. So this diagram here, just to kind of show you what fragility means in case you've never dropped a glass. Basically, if you threw a ball at a pane of glass or breakable object or something, a fragile object would shatter. The ball would go right through it. A resilient object would probably stop the ball from going through it, but it would shatter and its integrity would be broken. And it may only take another few disasters, even if those might be quite rare, to actually break the thing and then make it fragile. On the other hand, an anti-fragile object, anything, could be a system, could be an object. It absorbs the disaster, the ball hitting it, and basically makes a benefit out of that. It turns it to its advantage. That is what anti-fragility is. And whereas currently people who are extending their runway are probably resilient, they should focus on becoming anti-fragile in future. What does that actually mean? There's a lot of philosophical kind of ideas here and a lot of like, a lot of positing. But how would we turn that into something that actually matters for SaaS organizations? Just a reminder here, guys, if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Any thoughts as we're going along? I'd love to hear whether I've entertained you, kept you, lost you, perplexed you. Let me know in the chat. The first thing that you should be doing, there are 4 things that you should be focusing on in order to build an organization that thrives in hard times. And this is marketing specifically, okay? You should use dollar cost averaging in good times and bad times. So there are 2 approaches to making investments, right? 2 main approaches, if you will. The first one is you try to beat the market. Now, in this approach, and that's the light blue line there if you're watching. In this approach, you try to preempt the performance of the market and buy an appropriate number of shares. The idea there is that you're smart and ultimately you want your investments to go up. So, you know, you hear people on Twitter saying all the time, buy the dip, right? The reality is you don't really know when the dip is. You're just guessing. In the second approach, you make the same dollar investment every month, regardless of market conditions. Now, the theory is that prices fluctuate and therefore over time, you de-risk your investments because sometimes you're going to be the winner, sometimes you're going to be the loser, but overall you will optimize for growth. Now, the theory there is that you end up with a greater share as well of the actual, you know, the market, the company, whatever you're investing in. But this works as well for marketing, right? So the first element of our strategy is to encourage SaaS companies to use a dollar cost averaging mindset, no matter what the economy is doing. The economy is going to change. You cannot control the economy. As much as I like you as people, you're probably not smart enough, me neither, to actually preempt the market, right? It's gonna take you by surprise. So the goal of this is to avoid trying to spend any time on preempting what that market will do, good or bad, and instead believe that over time, my investment will likely yield positive returns. Now, in practice, this looks like making a steady baseline investment in marketing, whether that's paid media, whether it's brand, whether it's SEO. It doesn't really matter what you're investing in as long as it's effective. Every month you make that steady investment, whether the market's up or the market's down, right? So the fragile has already pulled out of the market. Like they've either shattered or they've basically retreated entirely and stopped spending money. They're trying to preempt the market, but the market is disastrous and they have no idea when the buyers of software are going to come back onto the market. They have no idea what that will look like. By the way, the data currently shows that there is not a slowdown in the SaaS buying market, as far as we can tell. So keep that in mind. The resilient organizations, the ones who think they've got it, they're extending runway infinitely. But remember, when are they going to make that choice to actually break from that and start investing in growth again? That's the challenge for those guys. They're trying to preempt the market. On the other hand, anti-fragile marketing organizations are just continuing to make investments steadily. Now, to put that into practice for you, this is a chart of one of our clients. I won't say who, but basically they invest this amount in Google Ads and Google Ads management every month. And here is the cumulative investment versus the cumulative lifetime value that comes from that. We have charts like this for so many of our clients because they're making smart choices and investing over time, regardless of market conditions. So that's the first one, use dollar cost averaging in good times. Now, the second approach and the second part of the strategy is to build pipeline. Right, so marketing teams in B2B SaaS often drive MQLs as a key result, marketing qualified leads. And look, while the qualification criteria for marketing qualified might be a weak point for lots of teams, when qualified effectively, those can really turn into revenue. Now, the issue here is exacerbated when a SaaS product is actually a business critical tool with long lockout periods for buyers. So in this diagram, we've got buyers in market versus the total addressable market. And if you are a business critical tool, particularly an enterprise, maybe you've got a sales model and that model takes like 6 to 9 months to close a deal. Like, first of all, you've got that. But the second thing is you probably got a smaller TAM, total addressable market, and therefore a bunch of your market is going to be out of market. And also it's a small market anyway, right? So the problem is that when marketing is cut and stops generating and nurturing MQLs and people at other life cycle stages, one of the downstream effects of that, although frankly, it's not usually very far downstream, and I predict that companies are going to start seeing this pretty soon, people who haven't done this, is that pipeline surety suffers. So pipeline surety being there's enough deals to work for the sales team, or there's enough people in the product pipeline to actually convert, and deal flow just dries up. Now, considering how many B2B SaaS companies have a sales-led go-to-market strategy, that's a super worrying effect of reductions in marketing spend. You're not just reducing the size of the marketing team, you're overall potentially endangering the organization because, look, if there's no deals for anyone to work, then you're going to end up firing your sales staff as well. And that's a big, big problem because of the downstream effects of that. So what should you do? Well, here is how the buyer awareness journey typically goes. So you've got problem unaware all the way over to ready to buy. Now, for buyers in market, you only have a small window, right? So you've got a large total addressable market, as we saw on that last slide there, but only a small portion of that market is actually in market, ready to buy or like considering a purchase at any given time. Now, on the other hand, the rest of the market is still there. They're just not buying. The mistake that most people make is not properly valuing those people in that rest of that total addressable market. And the reason for that is because they've too easily accepted the belief that the only thing that matters is SQLs or revenue. That's an extremely popular belief on marketing LinkedIn. If you're on there already, it's erroneous. It's flawed. So here is how the life cycle stages of an enterprise B2B actually play out in the awareness building and your total addressable market mix, right? So at the far left, you've got problem unaware people. You're probably not really that interested in them, although if you've got time on your hands and you've got budget, why not start building that? Those are people who are marked as contents or lead. Then you've got people who are probably marked as MQLs all the way from problem aware over to product aware. Those people should be receiving marketing messaging of some kind from you. Because remember what we said, at some point, you're going to need that pipeline. Those people can be converted if you're effectively building them over time. This builds your pipeline surety. And it also means that you're driving MQLs as well as SQLs or sales accepted leads, right? So ready to buy, that's a tiny proportion of your market, and it's being worked by your sales reps as it is. Let's talk about how you would actually drive that though. Like when the narrative is so heavily against MQLs, how can you actually make them meaningful? Now, the challenge here is to do this in a way that actually helps meet business goals rather than vanity goals. MQLs generated are pointless if they're terrible fit MQLs who never convert because they actually aren't qualified for anything at all, right? So classic, somebody downloads a lead magnet and you send them to sales. They don't convert, obviously, because maybe they're just a school kid doing their research. Bad fits all around. But we have a way that we've done this for many of our clients, basically driving MQLs that contribute to future revenue in a way that actually converts pretty nicely. I'm going to show you this case study. So we had this financial advisory software for client management. Kind of think about like think of it as like a kind of like a HubSpot for financial advisors. But basically they had a free trial with a sales support model. So they were partly free trial, partly sales. The issue was that the MQLs from their lead magnets were languishing in the pipeline. They had no way to really actually develop the awareness, and consequently, MQLs converted to demo or trial at about 2.5 to 5%. That's pretty low, right? You don't. What's the point in having the MQLs if they're going to convert so badly? Now, what we did was we basically redefined the purpose of the MQL in the pipeline more as a stage of awareness than as a like, hey, these guys are ready to receive a call from sales. And basically we offered ways for MQLs to build towards product awareness on their own terms. How do we do that? Well, the first things first, we created a lead magnet for each stage of awareness that was really well tailored to that stage of awareness. This is like a mock-up here that, because I can't show you the thing itself, but this is what we did for them. And we basically said, look, if you are currently problem aware, so your problem is that you're scaling your assets under management, that's what AUM stands for, or you want to, but you're worried that you're going to make some critical mistakes, then you should get this guide on how to avoid the 7 critical financial planning mistakes advisors make when trying to quantify their value. So the goal here is to give them a lead magnet that A, solves a problem that they have in a way that is short, actionable, goal-oriented, and is actually meaningful for them. It's not like some sort of rubbish checklist that you should just be able to download for free. Like, this is meaningful for them because they're solving a problem in their lives. It's well tailored to them. We ask for an email address and a job title. With a contextualized offer on the thank you page, we basically we built solution awareness into product awareness. So you're problem aware, then you realize, oh, there might be a solution and we're asking people who become solution aware to take the next step. Now, how does that work? This is simple, but very effective. Basically, instead of sending them, once they filled out that form, to a PDF in a browser window, what we said was, look, we'll email you the guide. It's going to take 5 minutes. We put a delay on it, 5 minutes to arrive in your inbox. And then we said, well, look, the next, in our heads, the next step in awareness is basically solution awareness. We need to get someone from problem aware to solution aware so that they know that there are ways to solve their problem. So we said, are you looking for a simpler way to scale your assets under management? And remember, this is basically the title of the original lead magnet that they've just downloaded. Obviously, they're interested in something like that. And then we offer them a 5-minute demo video where we basically presented our client solution as a way to solve their problem that they already told us that they had. They'd qualified themselves to be given this next message. And this, by the way, is just on the next page in the browser. It's not like we've sent them a long drip-fed campaign or anything like that. They literally requested the download. Next thing is they saw this. Then we said, okay, well, there's the demo. And basically, you could take a 30-day free trial of this. It's like a gimme offer, right? The effect of that is that 5 to 10% of MQLs became trials, which is really, really impressive, honestly, compared to 2.5% on non-contextualized offer pages. So that's how you develop awareness and actually make MQLs meaningful. And that's frankly like a pretty low-hanging fruit for most SaaS companies. Currently, a lot of people are creating MQLs that are really not doing anything for them. They're not converting, they're not qualified, they're bad fit. We've allowed people to basically choose their own adventure there and say, well, look, I want that, or I can take that next step, or I've got the guide, and maybe we nurture them over time then, potentially, if they don't convert right away. The reality is, though, there's not just one type of content that you need to build awareness. We've actually identified about 20 different types of content that work for different stages of that awareness journey. This diagram here is what we call our buyer awareness matrix. And it's what we've used to plan out the content that brings in actually strong, resilient pipeline. So just a quick note here. Some of you are probably thinking, is this gated? Is this not gated? Should I gate it? Shouldn't I? The reality is some of it is gated, some of it is not. So an example here, product aware. You've got comparison pages and use case pages. We literally would never think to gate those, because those people, they're looking for a solution right then and there. They're probably going to take the next step anyway. All we have to do is actually show them the information. Kristen asked in the chat there, is there somewhere that I can download your buyer awareness matrix? Yes, there is. It's from our website. You can go to poweredbysearch.com/blog. But I believe if he's still here, Marc Benoit is on the call, and it would be super helpful if at this point, Marc might drop a link in the chat for Kristen. Otherwise, I'll include it on the, oh, there you go. Thanks, Marc. I'll include it on the follow-up to this webinar anyway. Okay, so that was build pipeline. The next area of the strategy is to invest when others are withdrawing. Okay, this one probably doesn't seem obvious, right? So the SERP, this is an example. So search engine results page, if you're unfamiliar with that acronym, it's complicated, it's crowded. There's a lot of competition. Now, currently, that's how it looks. You're competing with a bunch of different people, but soon, companies are going to stop investing regularly in maintaining and improving their marketing. And this is so common, you wouldn't believe it. Companies who are making big cuts to their marketing in response to crises. And remember, the key thesis, these crises are going to keep coming and they're stacking and it's chaos. So you have to plan for chaos. Plan like this. This is what's going to happen to companies who stop investing regularly in maintaining and improving their marketing. They're going to see their search rankings decay. That happens. It happens so fast. Google, Bing, they all reassess their rankings regularly. The other thing is that their ad campaign bidding strategy will become uncompetitive. Other competitors will be bidding for the exact same ad placements as them. And so over time, they're going to see that that actually returns less on the investment. And the other thing is that if they stop, for example, sending emails or putting out social media content or anything like in communities, whatever it is, if they stop putting out that stuff and being present because they've been cut from the marketing, the marketing line on the budget has been cut, they're going to stop getting attention in all of those places. And so you're going to end up in a situation, if you continue to invest when others withdraw, where the SERP looks like this. You suddenly have way less competition. There's still going to be competition, clearly, because not everyone's a professional marketer, but your company is going to be able to dominate in the SERP if you continue to invest in content, SEO. And this is the same, by the way, for whichever channel that you're working in. You will get more space because others will be pulling out. So the third point, continue to invest when others withdraw from the marketplace. Let's pick up with these guys again. So these people, they just got cut from their organizations. Sometimes there'll be like skeleton crews who stick around just in the hope that these things improve. Sometimes, even the kind of the more foolish will actually keep on staff members who, even if they cut everyone else, they'll just keep them there and give them minimal funding to actually go off and make marketing work for their organization. Terrible idea. We actually have a blog post on our site also about how to set SaaS marketing budgets the right way. So yeah, definitely take a look at that. But these people, they're all out of work. And here's the thing. They have deep sector knowledge. So if they're competing with you, they're in one of your competitors. Now, whether that's an immediate competitor or an adjacent competitor or someone who's totally unrelated to you, but is solving a similar problem set, they have deep sector knowledge. They also know your competitor's business inside out. They've been there with the marketing metrics. They've seen the performance. They've seen the budgeting. They've seen the strategy. These people, they also know, they have personal connections to your competitors' best customers. Now, again, some of them are adjacent, some of them are not, some of them are in totally unrelated markets, but they still have personal connections to people who have the same problem that you're solving with your product. And the final thing is total humanity here, total soft moment compared to the rest of this presentation. They're just good people, right? They're looking for a place to do their best work. So many of our friends, working in SaaS companies are going to lose their jobs. And that's sad, but there's so much opportunity for you if you are still in post to think, hey, look, I could hire those people because they're all open to work, right? They want to work. They have amazing knowledge. They're amazing skills. They're talented people. And in my experience, there's always good work for good people. So hire great marketing talent from competitors when they get cut. Just to recap then, use dollar cost averaging in good times. Build pipeline now or as soon as possible. Invest when others are withdrawing. And finally, hire great marketing talent from competitors. So I'm going to open it back up now.